Yeah, I'm excited about Richard Wesley. I'm equally as excited I get to once again break out a Guardians of the Galaxy line.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. What happens next at quarterback? Oregon's got a backup plan if things continue not going according to plan at that position, but they do finally have a commit for me to talk about and a basketball commit. That is all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, one of my favorite Guardians of the Galaxy lines is in Volume 1 when Quill is desperately trying to get everybody to call him Star-Lord, and he re-encounters the guy who has the machine, built into the side of his head. And when he sees him for the second time, he calls him Star-Lord, and then Quill grins and says, "Finally." Well, that's kind of how I feel, once again, Oregon landing a recruit. This is the first 2026 football recruit Oregon has landed since February, when four-star safety Xavier Larice picked the Ducks. So, yes, it has been a minute, as the kids say. But Oregon has landed Richard Wesley, and I will get to Tristan Phillips becoming my favorite Duck recruit of all time later in this segment as well. But Wesley is a phenomenal pull for the Ducks. 6'5", 250 pounds, a composite five-star recruit. And according to Greg Biggins of 24/7 Sports, in his scouting report on Wesley, who comes from Sierra Canyon, down in the Los Angeles area, more on that in a moment, he says that Wesley is the best edge player to come out of the state of California since Kayvon Thibodeau. Now, that is just not a name I think should ever get thrown around lightly. Maybe Biggins is just drawing a connection rather than it being a perfect stylistic connection. I'll get Brian Smith on the show to break down his film tomorrow. Brian is, of course, great on that sort of stuff, so make sure you tune in then. But this is a big-time get for the Ducks. It's catapulted their class. Briefly, it was up to number 14 nationally. Now it's number 15. But regardless, this is a really nice piece for Oregon to have, and hopefully is going to lead to them kind of springboarding forward. Now, I think it's notable that he comes from the Los Angeles area because the narrative surrounding USC recruiting, which is number one in the country right now, and that's certainly worth keeping an eye on if you're the Ducks. This isn't the last guy in the SoCal area that USC and others will be after. I don't think USC was heavily as involved with Wesley here as some other schools were, but the good news for Oregon is that they land Wesley. The other side of the coin, of course, is you think about guys like Brandon Arrington, who's a two-way player, primarily a corner, 4 or 5-star sort of guy. He is also going to be pursued by USC because what the Trojans have done, and those of you that listen to or watch my show out there who are active in the online space know this from engaging with USC fans online. The big narrative around USC's recruiting is they're putting up a fence. They're putting up a fence around Southern California, and certainly they have done a much better job of keeping guys commit or keeping guys at USC and getting them to commit to USC and stay at USC, at least so far in this class, than they have in previous cycles. And that's been kind of the foundational narrative for their currently top-ranked recruiting class. It's likely to stay there, not just because of the volume, but the caliber of guys that they've landed as well. And a couple of those guys have been Oregon targets or former Oregon commits. So going down and in the midst of all that, being able to get Wesley, who's a 5-star defensive end, edge player, you get the idea. That's a really, really big win for Dan Lanning and the Ducks. So that's the first angle. Second angle with it is Wesley becomes the second 5-star for Oregon in the class of 2026, joining Kendra Harrison. And this comes on the heels, of course, this is a nice little recruiting win for the Ducks after the last 5-star news that Oregon had was Cody Green flipping to Washington. Now, there could be, possibly, I don't have high hopes, but hey, I should say I always have high hopes. I do not have high expectations that Oregon lands Jackson Cantwell, who is committing later today as this show is releasing, May 13th. And I'll talk about that more on tomorrow's show, regardless of where he goes. But Cantwell's the top offensive tackle in the country from the state of Missouri, which is where Dan Lanning is from originally. Went to William Jewell College and is from kind of the Kansas City area. And Cantwell, I think, is going to Georgia. That's my guess. If that winds up being a recruiting win for the Ducks and they pull 2 5-stars in less than a week, that'd be pretty darn good. But still, getting Wesley with a hilarious, just phenomenally hilarious recruitment video or commitment video, I think is really, really good news for the Ducks. And hopefully they continue to build on that in the coming weeks, because this 2026 class has a long way to go. It does show you how impactful one guy can be, but only when that guy is, a top 20-ish player nationally, depending on which service you look at, and a 5-star in the top 5 or so at his position in the class, and one of the top recruits overall out on the West Coast. So Wesley is a great pickup for the Ducks and has gotten him back inside the top 15 nationally. As I talked about last week with Brian Smith here on the show, I fully expect Oregon to be able to get back inside the top 10. Whether or not they can crack the top 5, I think depends on how things go. Do they get a Cantwell? Do they land Emmanuel Iheanacho, 5-star? Do they get Ryder Lyons? Do they get Brandon Arrington? There are a lot of names that are still out there that are highly rated recruits that will affect Oregon's class ranking. But for now, Oregon is back into the, shall we call it, winning column, or at least positive column on the recruiting trail, getting Richard Wesley. And I tell you what, of all the 2026 recruits, nobody is more hilarious than Tristan Phillips. So Tristan Phillips is a linebacker who's been committed to the Ducks for quite a while. And I was noticing the other day, he'd sent a tweet back at a Washington fan who'd, come at him saying, "You're making a mistake going to Oregon. Okay. He didn't send one tweet in response. He was on like a 2-hour long bender out on, I don't even know if that term applies. He was on a rampage. He was sending out a tweet story. Phrase it however you like. He was just going out there and clapping at Husky fans online, and I'm here for it. I'm here for that. That was too short of a round of applause. Round of applause for Tristan Phillips. So between Phillips doing that and then Wesley's commitment video, which if you didn't see it, it's a funny watch. He's out there just hanging out poolside in some compression shorts and nothing else, and starts walking and talking. I got to go to the place that showed me the most love. You ready, coach? And then he turns and the camera pans to Dan Lanning, who then takes his shirt off as he runs into the pool, and then they jump into a cannonball together. There are a lot of reasons the players like Dan Lanning. I imagine that youthful energy is one of them. But I saw some stuff going around about whether or not Wesley will be done. Crazier things have happened. I just feel more solid about a guy's commitment to a school when he makes a video like that. Just committing is one thing, but between Phillips going out there and just going back and forth online with Husky fans and Wesley making this video, I think those two guys are pretty locked in. And then, of course, you've got Kendra Harrison, a 5-star tight end, Tredarian Ball, 4-star running back, who have shut down their recruitment. So for those of you that worry about flips and whether or not that's going to come for Oregon's class, they have already. They certainly could again. I feel pretty good about those guys. Feel pretty darn good. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. But what about the quarterback position? It is utterly fascinating. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs, they're in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you like college football, yeah, you can do that too. You got win totals. Oregon's is 10.5, tied for the highest in college football. Are you more confident than me? Hey, bet the over. It's right there. It's right there over FanDuel.com. Big Ten title odds, national title odds. It's all there. It's all over there, FanDuel.com. Plus, you get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. How sweet is that? New to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, good to be back. I was in Utah over the weekend, which I suppose is not the most logical way to put that since I live in Utah. I was in a different part of Utah. Utah's a big state. I was doing some really cool hiking, but we are most definitely back. And Oregon is back to figuring out what they're going to do on the trail at quarterback. So Jared Curtis last week committed to the Georgia Bulldogs. Hopefully Jackson Cantwell doesn't do the same. I'm not optimistic, but I'm ever hopeful, or at least I try to be. So Oregon does appear to be pursuing at least one backup option if things don't go how they're wanting it to. So Matt Ponatoski is the latest Oregon quarterback offer out on the 2026 recruiting trail. He's a 6'2", 190-pound quarterback from Cincinnati, Ohio. 4-star in the 24/7 composite ranking, number 21 quarterback overall. He's the 291st player overall in the 24/7 rankings. He's got a warm rating to Kentucky, according to 24/7's website. The other schools most heavily involved, Arkansas, Duke, Louisville, and Indiana. So Power 4 schools, not the heaviest of hitters, though. And I found it notable that Oregon suddenly put an offer out there. If they hadn't made the offer before. Now, certainly, I doubt that was their first communication ever with the kid. But this felt very much to me like a backup plan in the event that Ryder Lyons doesn't commit to Oregon. Now, he got a crystal ball from Steve Wiltfong, who talked about it on a show for On3 on YouTube recently. That was shortly after the Jared Curtis commitment to Georgia, which, intensifies, logically, Oregon's efforts to go get Ryder Lyons. Now, the interesting thing about this quarterback situation for the Ducks on the recruiting trail is if they don't want to, or they don't wind up adding a quarterback in this upcoming cycle, that's never advisable. I do think Oregon is in as good of a situation as possible to not have a quarterback in the class. I think you're in as solid of a spot. Would I always advise taking one in recruiting? Yes, absolutely, because you want to have as many options as you possibly can. But Ryder Lyons is, remember, an LDS kid who is going to take what I've been told a 1-year mission after 2026. So he's really a 2027 recruit. So even if Lyons were to commit, would they go after Ponatoski and have him be the guy in 26? We'll see how heavily those efforts ratchet up. Obviously, I'm always up for getting a blue chip quarterback prospect and seeing how he could fit into the room, because you never know which guys are going to transfer out. I mean, next year at this time, I can see a world where you have the same quarterbacks on the roster as you do right now. I can also see a world where you only have 2. A year from now, if Dante Moore comes back, who's to say both Austin Novosad and Luke Moga stay to be the backup again? I would think Novosad transfers out. Certainly from what we have seen, he's talented enough to go start somewhere. That was the word on him coming out of high school. Looks like he's going to be able to do that one day. He'll be Oregon's backup this year. And that's a pretty easy sell to other schools to go get a Power 4 starting job. You think about a guy like Steve Angeli at Notre Dame, which is not a name most of you probably know, but that's why I'm here, to tell you about these sorts of guys. He backed up Notre Dame quarterbacks for the last 2 years. He never started. He was just a backup at Notre Dame. He just transferred to Syracuse because they had a quarterback injury, and Angeli is the favorite now to start at a Power 4 school in the ACC that just had a 10-win season. So being a backup at a big-time program that makes the playoff carries with it a lot of cachet when you go in the transfer portal. So I think that for the Ducks, you can't bank on the fact that both Novosad and Moga stick around going into 2026 if and only if Dante Moore comes back. Because if Dante Moore is a one and done as Oregon starter and goes to the NFL because he has a better season than I expect him to, and I expect him to be good, I think 2026 is when the NFL drafts community will look at him and go, oh, this is a first round pick. But if he surpasses my expectations this year and goes to the NFL draft, well, then I would think Moga and Novosad come back and they battle it out in spring, and that might even be a more legit quarterback battle than what we have been told publicly is a battle between Dante Moore and Austin Novosad this year. I tend to think it'll be Dante Moore. I think both guys are talented. I like where Oregon's quarterback room is at. So that's why I say, the Ponatoski, late offer at this point in the cycle is certainly noteworthy because it might tell you where the coaching staff's heads are at. But if you can just keep one of Novosad or Moga around for next year, if you can guarantee that happens, I think you're fine. I really think if your quarterback room next year, let's say Novosad transfers out and goes to start at, UCLA, because they take all of Oregon's former blue chip transfers. Let's say that happens. Well, actually, no, it wouldn't be UCLA because they've got Nico Iamaleava, but they also have the younger Iamaleava brother down there at UCLA. So let's say Novosad goes to Syracuse next year and is lined up to be their starter in 2026. He leaves in the winter portal cycle, which is when it would be, we'll see how it all goes. But if that happens and your quarterback room next year has Dante Moore, Luke Moga in his third season, Achilles Smith Jr. in his second season, I know places typically have 4 quarterbacks, and yes, there was the one time way back when the Ducks had, Masoli or Justin Roper, someone was a 5th string quarterback and wound up playing. That's a once in generational sort of situation, and since Oregon's already had that, I'd take my chances there. Maybe you'd bring in some, no-name backup, or you bring in a guy in the portal that serves essentially as a Dante Moore type transfer in 2026 where, it's a transfer, but we're seeing it as a long-term project. Maybe that happens. But overall, I expect him to go after Ryder Lyons really hard, and I'll continue to track that recruitment here on the show. But, do I think they need to get a quarterback? Not necessarily. Would it make sense? Yes, of course. There is no recruiting class in which it doesn't make sense to add a quarterback. I just like where their room is at, and maybe I'm just glorifying the spring game a bunch in my head, but man, those guys look good. Really, really good. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. So we're going to the hardwood next because Dane Altman brought in another transfer. Another one, I like it. I like it. I'm not in love with it, though. I'll tell you why. First, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. All-in-one convenience is what they are all about. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's half. monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year at monarchmoney.com. All right, so the latest transfer for Oregon basketball is probably the most proven of the bunch. It's Sean Stewart coming over from Ohio State. He was at Duke before that. He played in 33 games as a freshman, only averaged just over 8 minutes played per game. But last year at Ohio State, he played in 30 games. He started 30 games. He averaged just under 6 points and just under 6 rebounds a game and just under 1 block per game. Pretty darn solid production. He is 6'9", 224 pounds. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. So 63 games of college basketball experience definitely separates him from the rest of Oregon's transfer class, because he has played at 2 different Power 5 schools. Remember, in college basketball, it's Power 5 because you got the Big East. But he's played at 2 different Power 5 schools. And, yeah, he didn't do a ton his freshman year when he was at Duke, 2.5 points and just under 2 rebounds per game. But took a big step forward a year ago production-wise. I don't think he is a starter for the Ducks. I think he is a bench guy. That's fine. I think this move makes a lot of sense. I think Oregon's front court is now set, provided that Nate Biddle comes back. We still haven't heard. The deadline goes on for about another month or so with regards to the NBA draft. I hope we hear before then. I tend to think like Stewart is a good addition. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of sense here, which I'll get to in a moment. This is not someone who I want Oregon to be reliant upon to put him in a starting role and suddenly ask him to do a lot of scoring. That's not what he does. He is a high-energy sort of big who has not made a three-pointer in his career, and at the free throw line has never shot better than 53.6%. And this past year at Ohio State was 50%. So Nate Biddle needs to come back. That just continues to be clear. I don't know that there are other options available out there that could replace what Nate Biddle was. So let's presume, let's be optimistic for a moment, that Nate Biddle comes back. Your front court, I actually really like. I really do. Because what you have is Nate Biddle and KJ Evans are starting at the 5 and the 4. You have 2 guys that can score at 3 levels of a defense. We'll call Evans 2.5. His mid-range game is a work in progress, as is his 3-point game. But I think that those guys, as your 4 and 5, good offensive front court, great defensive front court. You have brought in Miles Goodman, former 4-star recruit, who was at Penn State for 1 year, didn't play a ton. Now you've brought in Sean Stewart, who did play a lot this past season and is a proven commodity. And so your top 3 bigs are going to be the most experienced ones: Evans, Biddle, Stewart, and you slowly work Goodman into the fold and let his career progression develop over the course of the season, and then he steps into a bigger role the following year. That, I think, makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. But you have got plenty of size. You have got 4 bigs that are 6'9" or taller. I think Goodman is listed 6'10", Stewart 6'9", KJ Evans is about 6'8", 6'9", and plays, I think, a lot longer than that. Nate Biddle is every inch of 7 feet tall and plays taller than that. So I think that front court can be really, really good at both ends of the floor. Your back court, there's a question mark in there somewhere. You have Jackson Shelstad confirmed to be coming back. That's great. Shelstad is awesome. And I hope he stays for 4 years as a Duck. He's going into year 3. Pretty big expectations. I had big expectations for him last year. He lived up to them. He was really good. He actually got better in conference play. It's typically the other way around. But Oregon played a tough non-conference slate. They were, of course, unbeaten in that stretch. They got to Big Ten play, and Shelstad played a lot better. So that was a great thing to see, and I expect big things from him next year at the point guard spot. It looks to me like Devon Pryor, the small forward transfer from Texas, is likely your starting small forward. He averaged like 3 points a game last year. I think he has 1 career game scoring double digits. High upside. Not really sure where the floor is at if you ask him to start. But what I like about this Sean Stewart edition is I know what I am getting. and that is Supreme Cook round 2. I'm here for that. Now, Supreme Cook, who came in from Georgetown and a lower level school before that in his career, prior to his one season with the Ducks, he saw his role diminish as the year went on. I don't entirely know why. I think it had to do with his defense. He's a good rebounder. He's an energy big. And that is what, when you read the scouting report, watch the highlights for Sean Stewart, who had a really good game against the Ducks when they played the Buckeyes in Columbus this year. He is an energy big. He was a 5-star coming out of high school because he is 6'9", 220. He is physical, and he is an athlete. He is not a shooter. He's not a huge scorer, but he's going to come in, work hard, and based on the numbers I've seen compared to what Supreme Cooks were, he's probably a little bit of a better shot blocker there. And I think that's why Supreme Cook's minutes faded as the year went on. Dana always tightens up the rotations as the season progresses, but having a clear-cut number 3 big is an important role. And Oregon played 4 bigs last year. Remember, they had Angel and they had Biddle, and then off the bench, they brought KJ Evans, who was basically the starter at the end of the year. He played way more than Angel did. And they had Supreme Cook. So I think you have your rotation of 4 bigs, and I thought Dana's rotation of the front court guys last year was masterful from the non-conference slate all the way through to the NCAA tournament that unfortunately ended in the round of 32. But Sean Stewart, I think, has a higher ceiling than Supreme Cook because he's proven it at the Big Ten level. 30-game starter last year for the Buckeyes. And, every now and then he can score in double figures. If he really gets some quality looks or works hard on the offensive glass. Like, I think he's somebody that can just come in and provide that sort of spark. But I don't get the sense, looking at his numbers and the production he gave Ohio State last year, he ever feels like he needs the ball. I think he's a guy who works to get his own offense. He doesn't, need somebody like certainly, working the pick and roll game. Any big is going to get easy shots like that off of passes from guys like Jackson Shellstad. But I think that for Stewart, this move makes plenty of sense. The reason I said I'm not in love with it is because it just further solidifies in my mind Nate Biddle has to return. I think he will. I think he will. I hope that he will. I like the Stewart edition. If Biddle changes his mind, though, and your starting front court is Sean Stewart and KJ Evans, now you kind of have a problem because Biddle is a 3-point shooter. Biddle is a high-end volume scorer who, what do you have against Washington in the regular season finale? Like 36 points or something like that in Seattle? Stewart is not able to give you that. He does not have the offensive repertoire. He could take a step forward, probably not going to do that. So I like the way he could rotate into the fold. I think it is a good move, a logical move for Dana Altman and the Ducks. But the next big piece of news, unless they can find a proven transfer guard / wing, kind of a TJ Bamba type, Oregon could be done in the portal. They've added 4 guys, Pryor and Goodman, and now Stewart, and then TK Simpkins, the Elon transfer, who was an all-conference performer there at 18 points a game. They could be done. They could very well be done. I think that is contingent upon how much they like the combination of Des Lindsey, who's a JUCO guy that got hurt and missed basically all last season, and Jamari Phillips, who's a freshman, one-time Arizona commit, played a little early on last year, didn't play for most of the season. Could be Keyshawn Bartholomew, which is a role you got to fill. Someone's got to score those points. But, at some point I'll do a segment here on the show, like where does Oregon scoring come from last year? Even if you have Biddle back, there's a void. And I think Stewart fills the Supreme Cook hole left on the roster from last year. The other one, I still have some questions. But overall, I like this move. I like Stewart, high-end, energy and motor sort of guy. Those are guys that Dana really likes. So I think that fits with the Ducks. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And go Ducks.